we are Christ Point Church. We're one church in 2 locations and several media outlets, and we want to say welcome home. Today is Christmas Eve. So today is Christmas Eve. So therefore, what that means is it starts either yesterday or today. So how many of you wave to me and say you've already been to family's house yesterday? It starts today for me. I mean, as soon as I'm out of here, it's family. So, and you know, and it's real because we got one down there in the McMinnville that we don't care anything about. But I mean, everybody's got that real one. No, I'm just kidding you. They're all pretty cool. So gathering up all my grandchildren and taking off down there in a little while. But anyway, because of her, week 4. Because of her, this is the last sermon in the series of Because of Her. We looked at Sarah and Rahab and Ruth, and then we went to the Marys, Mary Magdalene, Mary the worshiper of Bethany, and now Mary the mother of Jesus. So we're looking at, it's all because of her. But before we do that, I like to do an annual thing at Christmas time where I just break down what it's like to be Christian at Christmas time in the South. So here's how we roll. Christmas in the South. Tips for Southern living Christmas in the South. Save all bacon grease. Number 1 tip, save all bacon grease. It's the main ingredient for everything. You can even rub it on yourself if you don't feel so good. So save all bacon grease. Number 2, if you forget someone's name, shake hands with them and call them by the name of Bubba, because they will not be the wiser, and probably 78% of the people you meet go by the name of Bubba. So you're safe. Number 3, just because you can drive on snow and ice, don't mean you should. Doesn't mean you should. Why not wait for the 6 hours it takes for the roads to clear in Tennessee, and you'll be back on the road? So it's going to clear in 6 hours, trust me. So, and believe me, you don't have to go buy the store out on bread and milk, because it's not going to snow that much. Okay, number 4, watch for Tennessee blizzards. This is very important. If you'll notice with me, this is a Tennessee blizzard. There will be no snow, but the roads will all be white from salt. So we have no snow, but we have all white streets. So that's a Tennessee blizzard. Number 5, if you do get out and you happen to run into a ditch, I have no idea why you would, because it never snows. 4 guys. If you do get out and you have an accident, you run into the ditch, rest assured 4 guys sooner or later will pull up in a single cab pickup truck, 4-wheel drive. One will have a spit cup in the back of his britches, and one of them will have a chain, and they will pull you out. Now here's the thing. Leave them alone. Don't interrupt them, because they live for this. So just let them do their thing. Let them do their thing. Number 6, if you do get snowed in for Christmas, worry not. Worry not, because you're only 4 to 5 miles from any convenience store, which is open all the time. They sell food, bait, fishing bait, and videos. So everywhere, if you know you're in the South when you walk into a convenience store and you find food, fishing bait, and videos in a convenience store. So there you go. Number 7, for those of you who are transplanted to the South from somewhere else. Now, we have folks around in our church that are transplants. You're either from the north or you're from the deep south of Florida. So those of you who are transplanted to the South from somewhere else, the word y'all is singular. That's how y'all doing. See, it's singular. The word all y'all is plural. So there's no such word as y'alls. So how y'all's doing? Y'alls is plural possessive. So we have 3 words that are very important in the South. Y'all, singular. All y'all, plural. All y'all's, plural possessive. So, number 8, if you are a transplant to the South, get used to hearing the words, y'all ain't from here, are you? Got the y'all in there, see? Got the y'all in there. And number 9, and the most important, not to be the least, in the South we have 4 TV stations. CBS, NBC, ABC, and Hallmark Christmas movie channel. So believe me, because that's all I ever see at my house, Hallmark movie channels. So anyway, and I'm going to tell you, this is free, totally unscripted. Tina's doing something over here. I got it on news. For once in a blue moon, I've got it on news, and they're saying that they had this robot that they plugged in 1,000 hours of Hallmark movies. Now this is true. And I'm like, did you hear this? And she's like, what? I'm like, nobody hears it when it's important. They plug in 1,000 hours of Hallmark movies, and the thing writes a script according to the 1,000 hours of Hallmark movies. And it's the same script they used, every one of them. So nothing was different. Everything was the same. I'm like, I could have done that, and I'm not a robot. So because of her, let's get on track. Because of her, as Christians, let's get something. We're going to look at Mary, but as Christians, we get very guarded concerning Christmas. As Christians, we get very guarded concerning Christmas, and we're quick to defend the reason for the season. You ever think about that? You know, you'll see Santa Claus, and you say, well, Jesus is the reason for the season. See, we see programs about Santa Claus. We have decorations of Santa Claus. We have lawn ornaments, and we in the South, some of us got great big ones in our yard of Santa Claus. We line our children up to see Santa Claus. When I was a kid, the line went down the street to get in that building over there to see Santa Claus. We have books filled with stories about Santa Claus. So this is not a bash Santa Claus sermon. See, as Christians, we jump in to defend what we believe by saying Jesus is the reason for the season. But see, that ain't altogether true. Don't stone me just yet. Don't drag me out in the street and stone me. Jesus is not altogether the reason for the season. We say that, but we don't really know what we're saying. Let me show you what I mean. John chapter 10, verse 10. In the second portion, not the first portion that we always quote, which I've quoted probably 5 times in the last 4 or 5 sermons. John chapter 10, verse 10, part B. I have come that they may have life and have it more abundantly. I have come that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly. Romans chapter 5, verse 8. God shows His love for us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Luke 1:68. Now let me tell you what's going on in Luke chapter 1. There's a guy by the name of Zechariah who is the father, who's going to be the father of John the Baptist. His wife is an old woman, Elizabeth, and she's become pregnant, and because he had a small degree, and I just think it's a very small question of disbelief, God just made him mute. He couldn't speak for 9 months. So he can't speak, he can't say a word. He breaks the silence. In all reality, the silence of 400 years is broken right here. So he breaks the silence and begins to prophesy about the Son of God. And this is what he says: Blessed be the Lord God of Israel, for He has visited and redeemed His people. So, let me just break it down for you and tell you how it is. You and I are the reasons for the season. Now, we have good company. We share that distinction with the King of Kings. We're in good company, but I'm going to tell you, when you go home tonight, sit on the edge of your couch and have a talk with Jesus. And ask Him, why did you do all this? And He'll say, I did it for you. That's why He'll say, I stepped out of glory, down from glory. I stepped into a dirty hay manger in a barn stall. I did it for you. Yeah. So without you, I have no reason to do this. So why did you die on a cross? I did it for you. Well, what if I wasn't here? Well, then I had no reason to do this. If it wasn't for you and me, there would be no reason for the season. So when you hear that Jesus is the reason the season, just tell people, say, no, it's about me. It's all about me. Tomorrow, if you read tomorrow's article in the paper, which is a lot about this sermon, the title is "It's All About Me." It's all about me. I'm the reason for the season. So with the Christmas journey being about us, so let's see why it's all because of her. Let's visit this teenage girl. Man, let's just break this poor old girl down. What pressure could be on her? Oh my gosh. She's a teenage girl. She's pregnant. She's more than likely about 9 months pregnant. And I don't think there's a lot more pregnancy after that. So she's in that way pregnant stage. Okay, so she's pregnant. She's 9 months pregnant. She's traveling by foot. Now, she might have been on an animal, but you know what? She was traveling from somewhere to get to somewhere. She traveled through the desert. She traveled through the wilderness. She traveled on hilly terrain. She had to kick rocks out of the way. In today's society, and we've had enough of them here in the last year that were pregnant, and we watched them go from pregnant day 1 to pregnant day 9 month, and here, let me help you make sure you don't fall. Well, the ground's as level as a pancake. They ain't going to fall, but we don't want a pregnant girl to fall. And here's a pregnant Mary walking around with stones and rocks. And I mean, it ain't even easy for an animal to walk. And she's having to walk on this kind of terrain. And she's going to a crowded Judea town. God was using the pride of a selfish Roman ruler. There was a guy who was a Roman ruler. He ruled all the people. He was wanting to count how many people he had. So God was using the pride of a selfish ruler, a Roman ruler, to lead a pregnant Mary to a barn stall in Bethlehem. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Ain't nobody picking that place. If you were to say right now, I'm going to tell you, this is kind of how it lays out. She could have went into labor premature because she was on a tough journey, but God made sure she didn't. There was no cops that she could have a baby in the back of the car because she didn't make it to the hospital in those days. There was not one. There are 3 messianic prophecies mentioned, messianic being the Messiah. There are 3 messianic prophecies mentioned in the book of Matthew concerning Jesus' birth. In chapter 2. One of them is Matthew chapter 2 verses 13 and 15. Talks about Egypt. Another one in Matthew chapter 2 verse 23 talks about being a Nazarene. And another one in Matthew chapter 2 verse 6. And it says simply, out of you, O Bethlehem, you little place in the middle of nowhere, out of you. See, what that was saying was, out of Bethlehem, I am going to bring the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Now that was being prophesied all the way back from Micah, the Old Testament prophet Micah, in chapter 5 verse 2. All the way back, Micah 5 and verse 2 was saying, in Bethlehem would be born the Son of God. It didn't say anything about Mary. Just says he would be born. Out of you, O Bethlehem. Anywhere else in the world wouldn't have worked. It just wouldn't have worked. You can't have a prophecy hundreds of years earlier about one location and then that location be almost the place that happened. It was almost the place that she gave birth because she went into premature labor on the way because the journey was tough. No, that's not the way the story lays out. God made sure everything worked out the way that it was supposed to work out, and she was in Bethlehem when she was in Bethlehem, at the time in Bethlehem, in the city that was prophesied hundreds of years earlier. Anywhere else wouldn't have worked. It just wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have worked. It would have made Jesus not King of Kings and Lord of Lords and Son of God. It would have made him not qualified. He would have been disqualified because that prophecy didn't come true. So anywhere else in the world wouldn't have worked. So I Googled something, and there's no way to find an answer to this question. I Googled how many towns and cities, large and small, are there in the world. And basically everything I get was it's impossible to calculate this, what you're asking. But an estimated figure is 2.5 million towns and settlements and cities in the world. Maybe millions more, who knows? But towns and cities, out of 2.5 million locations, possible locations, God led a teenage pregnant girl. Out of an impossible calculation, he led a teenage pregnant girl to a single barn stall in a single town in the middle of nowhere to a family that were nobodies, and fulfilled a 700-year prophecy about one person, one mother, and one location. Now, just if you ever think to yourself, I kind of doubt Jesus is who he says he is. I kind of doubt Jesus is the Messiah. Look and find one prophecy about him that is not that was false, and you can disqualify him. You won't find one. When God, let me just tell you, when God began, let's look at the practical application to this particular portion. When God is leading us around sometime, you're like, I ain't getting it. I don't know what God's doing. I don't know why God is doing this. When God is leading us around and we'd rather quit but we keep going? When God is leading us around and we'd say, you know what, I don't even know why I stay at this job. You know, it might be because in 2 months, this anointing that is on you is going to break down the yokes of the person sitting next to you, and they're going to need you, and you're going to be able to pray with them. So it may just be that, but when God is leading us around, and it looks like in circles sometimes, it might just be His plan coming to fruition instead of ours. His plan working out in our lives, not our plan working out. So sometimes we may just look at every situation and say, God, why in the world is this going the way that it's going? Because we had this this vision of grandeur, and God's like, you know, I never said that. What I said was, walk with me, and I'm going to make it worth your while. It's my plan, not yours, coming together. So let's jump to the book of Matthew. We're introduced in the book of Matthew to some guys, and we know them as wise men. Let's just call them what they are. They were called wise men. They didn't even live in the area. They lived hundreds of miles away by some figures. It don't say where. Some estimate according to who they were. It could have been as many as 400 miles away. So these guys lived a long way off. They had no idea who Mary and Joseph were. They didn't know Mary and Joseph. They didn't know who they were, didn't care to know who they were. They didn't know. God led them across deserts, just like Mary. He led them through wildernesses, just like Mary. He led them over hilly terrain, kicking rocks out of the whole way to the doorstep of Mary and Joseph, knocking on the door, right on the porch. Man, led them right to Mary and Joseph. God made sure He led them right where He needed them to be. God led those guys with a star. Now, we all know that. How many times can you imagine back in your life that you have either been a part of, you have seen, witnessed, or some form of fashion? You got the kids, they're dressed up in bathrobes, and they've got a wooden stick. Back in my day, it was a backer stick. It was a tobacco stick. And we had a cardboard star cut out on it, and somebody went home and sprayed it with gold paint. And we all know that the star is part of the Jesus story. God led them with a star. He placed a star in the sky. He placed it high up in the sky, not on the ground. He didn't lead them from the ground. He led them from the sky. He didn't use road signs. He didn't use marks in the sand. He didn't use tree signs. Nobody was nailing signs on the tree for them to follow. Nobody was making marks in the sand. There's a big arrow right here. You better go that one. You better not miss it. God was showing them in the sky how to get there. He didn't use anything else. He had them to look up in order to see where they were going. They couldn't see where they were going unless they were looking up. Maybe, bringing this thing into our application of our lives, maybe God wants us to keep our focus high on Him. Maybe that's what He's telling us today. You need to keep your focus high on me. And you say, well, why would God tell me what I need to do? Because He's got every right to. So when God says you need to do something, then we need to do it. So maybe God wants us to keep our focus high on Him. When our focus falls, you notice how it looks? Snow falls, rain falls. My stepdad fell the other day. My mom fell too, I think. They're 80, they can do that. My mom's 81. She can run somebody down the street right now. She can run farther than we can. Falls, she just bounces right back up like a ball anyway. But when something falls, that means it's coming from up here to down here. When something falls, that means it's coming down. When our focus begins to fall on anything, when our focus moves from up here on God to down here, it may be a job. My focus is on a job now. My focus is on children. My focus is on bills. My focus now is on the conflict that the devil wants to make sure keeps my attention. The conflict. Because I'm going to tell you something. If you don't have a conflict going on in your life, you're probably going to get one pretty quick. Or you just come out of one. There's some conflict. The devil's going to make sure he keeps it stirred up. And you know what I'm talking about. So anyway, if we become so focused on this, then we become less focused on God. So God led them from the sky. That's the only way God's going to show us what. God wants us to be looking up. God is not the author of confusion. That's in the Bible. Go look it up. I promise you it's in there. Distractions they don't reside on high. So I'm going to say it in a southern way. I love the southern thing because I is one. You know what I mean? I want to say, I got a friend of mine, South African. He tells me, he says, you know, he's a South African, and one of his campus pastors is Australian. And he says, all you need to do is come here and we have all the accents covered. He thinks I have a weirder accent than him. And he says, water. I'm like, it's water. Hang on, I got to get a drink of water. I'm like, you got to get a drink of water. So anyway, distractions. I'm going to say it in a southern language that we understand. Distractions don't reside up where Jesus says distractions aren't high. They're down low. They hover low so they can get our attention low. So our attention is down low and we're focused on this rather than Him. So if the wise men had focused lower, I'm convinced if they'd have been looking for signs anywhere else, they would have missed Jesus. We would have had this X'd out of the Bible completely. Wise men and wise women focus on higher things. But there is a Christmas story. There's something in the Christmas story that stands out boldly concerning Jesus' birth. Stood out to me this week. This has been a tough week. You say, preachers don't have tough weeks. Well, I did. So I have a tough one every now and then. I have a tough one. You know, you ever walk into work and you just want to quit? Well, I've done that before. I was listening to a pastor that I listen to a lot on his podcast. I like him. I kind of like him because he's funny. Go figure. And I listened to him and he says, you know, I was going through one of the toughest aspects of ministry in my life, and for the first time I wanted to quit. And I'm like, who wants to quit? Who wants to give up and quit? Well, God showed me what that's like. And let me tell you, sometimes you show up and you just want to quit. And then, you know what I did? I stood at my back door, had my hands behind me, I looked out over the fields, and I'm like, I'm just depressed. And I said, okay, I'm going to go to my word. So instead of going to the application for today, for the reading for the day, I went to where I was the night before, and I went into the other app, and it's called Blue Letter Bible. And if you have an opportunity download, it's very good. And I went, and the first thing I saw was this. This is the first thing that I saw, and I want you to see it with me. The word that is common, that is a common thread that draws all of this together is fear. Everything. It draws all of it together as fear. Luke 1:30. In Luke chapter 1, verse 30, the angel says to Mary, don't be afraid. I mean, I'm not even going to tell you what's going on yet. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. That's the first thing I saw when I sat there on that rainy morning. I sat there, looked out over the field. It may not have been raining, I don't know. But all I saw was don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Luke chapter 2, verse 10. Look at this common theme that's threading between all these people. The angel said to the shepherds out in the field, nobody, these guys are nobodies. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Matthew chapter 1, verse 20. Joseph, the man of the house, the man that is responsible for protecting the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Hey, Joseph, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Luke chapter 1, verse 13. A man named Zechariah, that would be John the Baptist's father, that was married to the old woman Elizabeth, who was well past years of having children. She wasn't having kids, and he wasn't giving kids, and God gave him a child. And he shut his mouth up, and he opened the silence, and he began to speak and prophesy about the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And he said to him, don't be afraid, Zechariah. Don't be afraid. See, this reminded me this week, man, it just permeated my heart, my being. Fear opens inroads to doubt. I'm going to tell you what fear does. Fear opens inroads to doubt. If I'm afraid to go into a burning building, I'm doubting whether or not I should. That's a pretty good one right there. You know what? You know, the building's burning down, and I've got a teddy bear, and I got to go get it for my granddaughter. Let's burn it up. We'll go get another one. Let's let her burn down. You know, the thing is I have fear. Some fear is good. But fear opens inroads to doubt. And as quick as we get a little fear in our lives, we doubt what God's doing. We doubt where we should be. We doubt we heard God the correct way. We doubt whether we should leave or move or jump or shout or crawl under or whatever. Fear opens those roads, those inroads to doubt. Fear causes retreat. Man, the first thing we want to do is when we see fear, we want to back up. When we get afraid, we want to back up. I'm afraid and I'm backing up. That's the first thing we want to do. That's our knee-jerk reaction. I'm afraid, so I'm going to quit. Drive down the road. I promise you. Drive down the road and go to Sligo and drive down and just keep driving all the way until the water hits the road hits the water. Fear's going to make you stop. Pretty sure fear's going to make you stop because you're afraid you're going to lose your vehicle and drown. So fear's going to make you stop. Fear has a way of controlling our thoughts. Going to wake up in the morning and I'm thinking about the same thing that I was thinking yesterday that struck fear in my heart. And I'm going to wake up in the morning and the same thing's going to go over in my head about the same fears. And fear has a way of controlling our thoughts. And all of these people could have had their thoughts controlled. They could have retreated. They could have doubted. Instead, God led out with, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Something big's about to happen. See, God was about to do the impossible through the most ordinary of people. Man, these are ordinary people. He is about to do the impossible through the most ordinary of people. And what he leads out with? Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. So in other words, this is too big for you. So when God tells us not to be afraid, it means it's too big for us. When my least granddaughter, 7 months old, she's starting to crawl everywhere. And in another month or 2 or 3, she's going to be wanting to walk. And we're going to say, don't be afraid, but she's afraid. See, she's not ready. God's telling them this because it's too big for them. If God's telling us this, then it's too big for us. Let's just not be afraid. Let's hang on because the ride's going to be worth it. Hey guys, you were doing this and you stopped on us and you watched us, and I appreciate it. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for spending some time with us. I pray that you enjoyed the service today. Let me take this opportunity to invite you out personally. We're located on the square in Sparta. Our service times are at 9 and 11 every Sunday morning. We'll meet you at the door with a hug. We'll meet you at the door with some coffee ready and some donuts if you want. And let me just take a real quick minute to invite you over to our Smithville campus. For those of you who can't drive over to Sparta, drive over to Smithville, 11 o'clock for now, at 614 Murphy Street in Smithville, Tennessee. So one of our campuses, Christ Point Church, we're real people, we're living real lives, and we're serving a real God. Welcome home.